Welcome to this too. I am your host, Timothy. This is a place where I'd like to create a safe space for us to speak about issues that affect us as men, but I can only do that through the lens of my experience with anxiety and depression. And today I want to speak about the secondary trauma that I experienced after the initial abuse that I suffered. Now, this is a sensitive topic and it could be potentially triggering, so I do want to advise if you identify with anything or you perhaps know of someone that might identify, please reach out for help. We'll provide some contact details at the end of the show. With that being said, I want to be clear, I am not a licensed therapist or qualified mental health practitioner in any way, shape or form. I am just a man trying to navigate my own mental health landscape, trying to navigate my experiences with depression, anxiety, and work through those traumas. And hopefully through my experiences and the things that I share here, I can hopefully help someone else. So with that being said, just remember, whatever you are going through, this too shall pass. So let's have a discussion in and around what I would like to term secondary abuse. Now, I know they tell us to speak up. I know they tell us to speak the truth. I also know what it's like to be a victim and not be believed. Why? Because the abuse came from a beautiful, charming person. And everyone saw the charm, no one saw the cruelty. When I reacted, when I got angry, suddenly I was the problem. To make it worse, I stayed far too long. I can blame myself for choosing to believe the lies instead of trusting the behavior. I can blame myself because I cared. I loved. I was committed. I chose this consciously. I was ready to go down with the ship, and boy, did I ever go down. So why it's especially hard to get out of toxic relationships and relationships where there is abuse is because there is something that is called a trauma bond. So psychologically, what I was experiencing is a trauma bond. It's an attachment that is formed through cycles of abuse and intermittent kindness. These cycles create a powerful and emotional pull, making it incredibly difficult to leave, even when the harm is obvious. And it's similar to a drug addiction, I think. That was only part of the hurt and the difficulties that I was going to experience. The truly difficult part came after the abuse. What was really damaging was the situation that arrived once I had begun to identify what had happened to me. Because when I began to speak up, when I began to call out what was happening, it was dismissed and ignored. I was even told to man up. When the person who was hurting me was being protected, and accountability was being dumped. And who picks it up? What are you supposed to do when someone refuses to own the harm they caused? Someone has to take on that responsibility. Someone has to take that on. I mean, there were so many things that happened subtly and secretively. Behind my back, there was gossip, there was rumors. People had misinformed judgments about me. All the while, the person who had inflicted all this harm on me was being protected, and the person who had subjected me to years of harm was seen as the victim. I mean, the harm I was subjected to brought me to the edge of my life. And what made it worse was the isolation that ensued. How few people actually stood by me. Few let me speak my truth without questioning it. I wasn't just being told to be quiet or to take my meds. I needed to be listened to. The experience of disbelief that I experienced, the dismissal, is sometimes called secondary or invalidated trauma, because it's more emotional harm caused not just by the original abuse, but the response by others, because they compound it, make you question your reality, make you question your sense of worth. The truth of what happened was never acknowledged, the truth of what happened to me. Not that I expected, given my understanding of what has happened, but that lack of accountability is one of the hardest parts to actually process and move past. When someone refuses to own the hurt they caused, yet demands accountability and honesty from you, it creates a deep psychological sense of confusion, and you question yourself, you question your memory, your perception, your sanity. And when they position themselves as the victim while ignoring the behavior that triggered your reactions, caused so much pain and anguish, and they try and flip that narrative and blame you for the behavior and for your reactions, it's incredibly invalidating. Because if there was no action from their side, there would be no reaction from my side. And I must own my reactions. Whatever was done, whatever happened, my reactions are mine to own. My reactions are mine and solely mine, and they were my choices. This disparity between the reality of what you experienced and what you are being led to believe, it's gaslighting. This is when someone tries to manipulate you into doubting your own reality. And combined with the cognitive dissonance of holding two contradictory truths at once, can produce confusion, self-doubt, emotional distress, and it's exhausting and can make speaking up feel impossible, because even in your head it doesn't really make sense what's happening. So how do you tell someone else? How do you try and explain that to someone else? And to make matters worse for me, I was also dealing with the profound heartbreak and loss of losing what I thought was the love of my life, my forever, my happy ending. Beneath all the abuse, the wound of heartbreak is also something that I've had to and am still dealing with. Even if the relationship wasn't entirely real or healthy, the love I felt, the dreams that I built, the life that I built, the future that I had invested in was real to me. And the grief of having to accept that is no longer the reality is difficult to carry. It's a weight. And then you layer that on top of the abuse and the manipulation, gaslighting, the reactive cycles that you had to endure, and then just the flat-out dismissal and invalidation of your pain and your experience. It creates a completely different kind of wound that you need to deal with and heal from. It's not just grief, it's grief compounded by betrayal and disbelief. And that combination can shake your trust in yourself and in others, making every memory and reminder sting even more. And I know how you wake up in the morning feeling depleted, heartbroken and sad because your relationship's over, and then you still have to deal with all those other things. And acknowledging this doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And setting boundaries and choosing when to engage and deciding to reclaim your story, even in small ways, is how you start to rebuild strength and resilience despite all the layers of hurt. And this podcast is one of my attempts to do that for myself. It takes an enormous amount of courage to speak up when you already doubt yourself. And when that courage is met with dismissal, silence, or skepticism, the wound is profound. But every small boundary I set, every time I choose not to check triggers or engage in harmful cycles, I claim a little bit more of myself. And every little bit of progress is important. Every bit of resilience that you build up is valued. I've gone through the stages of grief and abuse, and I've also been the victim of reactive abuse when someone escalates in response to your reactions. So I feel qualified to speak about what it really feels like to survive this kind of chaos and what it takes to rebuild your life and your mind afterwards. And bear in mind that I'm by no means the finished article. This is very much a work in progress, very much a daily challenge for me, but I do feel particularly emboldened about what the future holds. Through all of this, there were people who listened, who didn't question my sanity, who offered compassion instead of judgment. Their support and guidance restored a small part of my faith in people, in love, and in humanity. For that I am deeply grateful. For those who offered their kindness and understanding even in small ways, thank you. Your support reminded me that even in the darkest times, there is light and that rebuilding a life after trauma is possible. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that what I've shared has been insightful. I hope it's helped. I just want to remind you that no matter what you are dealing with, whether it's good or bad, this too shall pass. Thank you so much for joining me today.